My name is Eva. I'm 36 years old, currently living and working as a structural engineer in San Francisco. But the story I'm about to tell you begins in a very different place, at my family's hillside mansion in Seattle during my mother's 35th birthday party. The crystal lights shimmered against wine glasses, laughter echoing through the lavish hall. Relatives, friends, and my parents' colleagues were all present. Everyone was waiting for the big gift reveal. And then my father stood, raising a set of Tesla keys along with the deed to a lakefront house. My mother beamed as she announced, "For Ryan, the son in whom we place all our hopes." The entire room erupted in applause. Ryan hugged her while I sat there holding a small gift box, handed to me with a knowing smile. Inside was nothing more than a $5 grocery coupon. And everyone burst out laughing. Have you ever been turned into a joke in front of your own family and relatives? Have you ever stayed so quiet that you wondered if you even existed in the house where you grew up? If this story strikes something in you, leave a comment below, hit like, and subscribe so I can keep telling you what happened next. Because after that humiliating night, I did something no one in my family could have imagined, and that was only the beginning. I still remember how my skin felt frozen, even though the room was warm with chandelier light and the hiss of the fireplace at the end of the hallway. Everyone was laughing, not at a clever joke, but at the coupon sitting in my palm. A flimsy piece of paper, folded in half, dull print, looking like something pulled straight from a junk mail flyer. My mother tilted her head, winking. "You've always loved saving money, haven't you, Eva? The gift suits your personality." Laughter broke out around the table, from Uncle Bob raising his wine glass to Cousin Sarah, who once taught me how to spell when I was little, now smirking. Along. Ryan patted my shoulder from behind, Tesla keys still clenched in his hand. "Don't be upset, sis," he said in the tone of comforting a child who lost a toy. "You've got the sharpest financial brain in the family. I'm sure you'll turn that coupon into some brilliant investment." That joke cut deeper than any blade. It drove home what I had long known but tried to ignore. I was never the priority in that house. All eyes were on me, waiting for me to laugh it off, to pretend nothing was wrong, to play the role of the mature daughter who endured in silence. But I couldn't. I truly couldn't. I placed the coupon on the table, rose quietly yet firmly. "Excuse me," was all I said before leaving the room. No one stopped me. The click of my heels echoed against the polished wood floors as I walked down the hallway. I glanced at the framed family photo, a vacation in Montana. In the picture, I was pushed to the back, head tilted slightly, smiling faintly. Ryan stood front and center, my mother's arm around him, grinning as if he'd just won a championship. I went upstairs, shut my door, and in that silence, the sound of my heartbeat pounded in my ears, drowning everything else. I didn't cry. There was nothing left to cry about. I pulled a suitcase from the closet, opened the nightstand drawer, and took out a small jewelry box. Inside was the silver ring my grandmother left me, a handwritten letter from college days, and a copy of the new job contract I had signed 2 weeks earlier. I packed them neatly, folded clothes carefully, each piece placed as though I was leaving a place that had already died inside me long ago. As I was slipping my laptop into my bag, the door creaked open. Ryan leaned on the frame, one hand in his pocket, the other twirling his new car keys. "Are you seriously mad?" His voice carried genuine surprise, as if he couldn't fathom why I'd overreact. "Come on, you know it was just a joke." Mom and Dad didn't mean anything. I looked at my brother, the same boy whose broken arm I carried nearly a mile to the clinic when we were kids. The boy who once dozed off behind me on the school bus, clutching his backpack. I had loved him like a piece of my own heart. "Get out, Ryan." He frowned, started to say something else, but then left. His footsteps faded down the stairs. I zipped the suitcase, slung the bag over my shoulder, It was nearly midnight. I walked softly down the dark hallway, descended the staircase. Laughter still spilled from the party. My mother was telling a story about how Ryan once helped my father close a contract, though the proposal had been drafted and sent by me. My father laughed loudly. He's the one carrying this family's future. I set the house key on the kitchen counter, beside the box of jasmine tea my mother brewed every morning. On a slip of paper, I wrote only a few words. From now on, I will live for myself. No signature, no explanation, no demands. I opened the door and stepped outside. The Seattle night air was sharp, freezing my face, reminding me I was alive, breathing. I drove away from the mansion. I didn't look back. Have you ever reached that moment when you realized, no matter how much you give, no matter how hard you try, you will always be the last choice? Have you ever left the place called home because you simply couldn't take it anymore? I left on Christmas night. No one called. No one came after me. Not a single message. That drive didn't just take me out of Seattle. It carried me away from the role of Eva, the strong daughter, and toward the first chance to live for what I truly needed. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew I would never return to the laughter that once made me feel invisible. I passed out of the wealthy neighborhood in North Seattle as the car clock blinked 12:13 a.m. Bare trees lined the road, their shadows stretching across pale snow like faded scars. Headlights swept over silent houses where families slept by the fireplace. And me, I plunged into the night, heart emptied of any room for new wounds. Only hollow. My hands tightened on the wheel as I drove past the Rainier gas station. Every time I stopped there, I'd call Mom to ask if she needed anything from the store, though the answer was always the same. Ryan likes that old brand of orange juice. Remember to grab it. Everything I did always circled back to one person. Cold air slipped through the cracked window when I shut off the heater. That chill wasn't as biting as the quiet memories creeping down my neck, slow and relentless, like the stale scent of air freshener that still haunted my old upstairs bedroom. I remembered being 10. Mom had promised a birthday party at the park, inviting the whole class. I'd spent the week excited, making paper decorations, handing out invitations. That morning, there was no rain, no emergency. Just that Ryan had a slight fever, and the party was canceled. No apology, no reschedule, just Mom bringing home a cake, letting me blow candles in the kitchen while Ryan watched cartoons in the living room. 3 years later, I won the state math competition. The trophy still sits in a wooden box in the shed, forgotten. Meanwhile, Ryan scored 10 points in a local basketball game, and my father had a custom frame made for his jersey, hanging it proudly in the living room like treasure. One night, while I was studying under the yellow glow of a desk lamp, Dad walked in with a stack of papers. "Your mother accidentally signed your name on a secondary loan. We need you to confirm it." I'd only been working a year, knew little about credit systems. Hearing bank was enough to make me anxious. But I signed. No questions, no conditions. Later, I learned it wasn't an accident. It was the only way they could take another loan to cover Ryan's tuition. After he switched majors for the third time, I survived on a full scholarship, 2 part-time jobs, government loans, handled it all myself. No one co-signed for me. On the highway south, I flicked on the interior light, catching the photo tucked near the dashboard. My graduation from UCLA, black gown, tight smile, diploma in hand. No parents in the frame. No Ryan. I had waited alone for over an hour. Mom later texted, "Your dad and Ryan got caught at the regional basketball finals. It's just a ceremony. There's video." I drove through winding pine roads, radio off. Silence filled the car like a pane of glass separating me from the world. I had once believed that if I tried harder, sacrificed more, they would see me. I had once paid off the mortgage for their second house, the same lakefront property they gifted Ryan as his deserved reward. I had once wired $4,500 to bail mom out of a credit card splurge during the word holidays. The only thanks I got, siblings should share with each other. Money is just money. Whenever Ryan was in trouble, I was the first call, the fixer. Writing emails, making calls, canceling contracts, finding lawyers. But when I needed someone to ask about me, that house was always too busy with more important things. My phone buzzed in the console. Mom's name flashed. I didn't answer. A text followed seconds later. Where are you taking the car in the middle of the night? Be back tomorrow. Ryan needs you to help with the land paperwork. I turned off the screen, shoved the phone under my purse. I wasn't chasing behind them anymore. I wasn't going to prove my worth through obedience. Light flickered on the horizon. I had driven nearly 130 miles since leaving the mansion. Fatigue pressed at my eyes, but it wasn't heavy. It felt like the air after a storm, damp ground, chilly wind, but clean. Ahead lay a fork in the road. One way led back to the city where I'd gone to college. The other led southwest to San Francisco, where Megan lived. I hit the blinker, turned the wheel toward the southwest, toward the light. I arrived in San Francisco close to 8 a.m. Fog still drifted lazily over the rooftops, sunlight just beginning to spill between skyscrapers. My headlights faded against the damp pavement. The salty breeze slipped through the cracked window, strange yet familiar, like a gentle embrace from a place I had once belonged to but had long forgotten. I parked in front of the old apartment building on 21st Street in the Mission District. Megan used to live here back when we were in grad school. The silver gray paint was peeling in places now, but the little wrought iron chandelier on the porch was still there, hanging crookedly just like the day I came over to make her noodles after her first bad breakup. I pressed the buzzer. The door swung open within seconds, and Megan rushed out as if she had been standing there all along. Ava? She looked at me for a long moment, then pulled me inside without another word. The rich scent of coffee, cinnamon, and lavender wrapped around me instantly. The apartment was still cramped, but warm and full of life. On the table sat an open laptop, a pile of interior design sketches, swatches of fabric, and 3 empty espresso cups. Oh my God, you drove straight here from Seattle? Megan gripped my shoulders, her brown eyes wide with both shock and worry. Didn't you stop to rest? What happened? I sank into the old leather chair, cradling the ginger tea she had just poured. Warmth spread slowly through my freezing fingers. I told her everything, every detail from the gift box with the grocery coupon to the applause when Ryan was handed the lakefront house. Even the look on my mother's face when she said the coupon fit your frugal personality. Megan sat stunned, her hand tightening around the mug, silent for a long while. You've carried this for too long, she finally whispered. I thought after all, these years, they'd have changed at least a little. I let out a laugh. Not from humor, but from exhaustion. Change? They've never even really seen me, Meg. All they see is a shadow that earns money, carries the load, and never bothers anyone. Ryan, no matter how many deals he ruins or exams he fails, is always the center. She froze for a second, then stood, pulling an old phone from a drawer. Unlock yours. I hesitated, then handed it to her. Go to contacts. Find Dad, Mom, and Ryan, she said. I looked at the screen. Mom flashed at the top of my recent calls. An unread message from Ryan sat at the bottom. Answer me. The more you blow this out of proportion, the more exhausted everyone gets. My throat went dry as I looked back at Megan. You know what to do. I held down each name. Selected block contact. 1, 2, 3. There was no dramatic soundtrack, no special lighting, just 3 names disappearing from my phone. The screen returned to silence. I exhaled so lightly I surprised myself that it had taken me years to do something so simple. Megan sat beside me, leaning her head against my shoulder. Now you can live on your own terms. No more proving anything. I nodded. Something shifted inside, like an old structure cracking open to make room for a new form. Stay here a while, Megan continued. I've got a spare room. Well, half a room. I'll need to clear out some books. But there's clean blankets, hot water, and always ginger tea. I gave a small laugh, the first in hours. Then I'll start here. The little room by the east-facing window, where Megan laid out an old but clean mattress, became my first shelter after fleeing into the night. I set down my suitcase, slipped off my shoes, and sat on the floor, gazing out at the rooftops shimmering in sunlight. The next day, I opened my laptop and drafted an email to HR. I want to request a transfer to the San Francisco office. Reason: personal. I'm ready to start a new assignment within a week. My fingers trembled slightly as I hit send, but almost immediately a strange calm spread through my chest. From the kitchen, Megan peeked her head out. You just did something big, didn't you? I smiled. Requested a transfer. She flashed a victory sign. Welcome to the life you choose. I turned back to the screen. Old project folders still lined the toolbar designs I had finished silently, late at night, after long work days. No one knew. No one noticed. But now, I was doing this for myself. Light slanted through the window, painting my hands gold as they rested on the keyboard. I had made it here, and I was staying. 3 days after sending the request, I received a reply from the HR director. We welcome Eva to the San Francisco office starting Monday. No questions asked, no explanation required, no demands for proof. I stared at the screen, letting the blinking cursor pulse like the steady heartbeat of something new. Inside me wasn't exactly joy, but something closer to peace light, like a spring breeze through an open window. Megan was the first to hear. She danced around the kitchen, brewing coffee, singing. Eva Collins, structural engineer extraordinaire, survivor of the disastrous birthday gala, now with a new office on Mission Street, San Francisco. I couldn't help but laugh, short but real. So, what do you need now? Megan asked, tilting her head. A new suit? Or maybe a little help from someone with a framed degree on the wall? I stayed quiet. Her gaze lingered on me as if she had already seen the answer. Dr. Lane Levine, PhD in psychology, specializes in family dysfunction and boundary setting. Her office is right next to that organic chocolate shop you love. I took the card she handed me. A silver border traced the edge, the name printed in soft green ink. I slipped it into my wallet without a word. 3 days later, I walked into that office. Not because I felt out of control, but because I needed to understand where I stood after years of carrying so much. The waiting room was quiet, the clock ticking softly on the wall. Gray velvet chairs, a wide window overlooking maples turning color. When Dr. Levine called my name, she smiled gently, no forced cheer. Not even the usual, "How are you today?" I sat down, hands on my knees, back straight. It took nearly 5 minutes of silence before I spoke. My family isn't bad people, I began. They just don't see me. She nodded, saying nothing. I learned how to succeed without making noise. I thought if I was kind enough, useful enough, one day they'd stop, look at me, and say, "We're proud of you." But that day never came. She stayed quiet, then asked softly, "And if it never comes?" I had no answer. My chest sank and lightened all at once. By the third session, things started to feel different. Not easier, just clearer. I wrote my own principles in a notebook. Not every word spoken deserves a response. Not every call needs to be answered. No one has the right to assume I will endure. Megan saw me writing and gleefully suggested, "One more rule, once a week, something just for Eva. No work, no family, no expectations." And she dragged me to a community center by the pier, where an adult painting class met every Saturday. At first, I refused. I had never painted. Only blueprints, straight lines, ratios, load-bearing numbers. But Megan waved me off. The less you know, the better the start. The class was held in a bright room with high ceilings, windows opening onto the bay. The smell of acrylic paint, damp wood, and sea air blended into something oddly soothing. I chose a seat near the back, listening quietly. The instructor was a man in his 30s with dark brown hair, his shirt sleeves rolled up, smudged with paint. He introduced himself as Daniel Monroe, an architecture lecturer at the California Design Institute. His voice was low, steady, each word pulling you into a rhythm of shapes and colors. When you paint, don't try to control it. Listen to what the form wants to become. I picked up the brush, hand trembling slightly. The canvas was blank, unmarked. Daniel moved around the room, stopping behind me. He said nothing, just placed a tube of blue beside my palette. Evening light often carries a touch of gray, a little purple, and a lot of quiet. I didn't know why he said that, but when the blue mixed with white and a hint of red, a strip of twilight began to appear under my hesitant strokes. I didn't feel like I was painting. I felt like I was breathing. During the break, he sat beside me on the old wooden balcony overlooking the bay. "You're an engineer, aren't you?" I turned. "How do you know?" "The way you hold the brush. Rigid, like a ruler. But the forms still come out soft." I looked out at the water. Little boats bobbed on the glittering surface. "You're learning to let go, while still keeping structure. That's hard." I faced him again. "Do you always talk in riddles?" Daniel laughed, eyes squinting in the sunday. "Only when I meet someone rebuilding themselves from pieces they thought were already discarded." I stayed quiet, but my heart beat a little differently. Not because of Daniel, but because something else was returning, the sense that I could still feel, not to be seen by someone else, but to see myself. By the end of March, after 3 months living and working in San Francisco, life settled into a rhythm. Mornings I brewed coffee and opened blueprints for the Santa Clara Overpass project. Tuesday afternoons I met Dr. Levine. Saturdays I painted at the community class, sometimes talking with Daniel about light, form, and nameless things. Everything flowed like clear water until the phone began to ring non-stop, dragging in the old shadows I thought I had left behind outside this city. The first call came from my mother's number. "Eva, I just want to hear your voice for a moment," she said in her voicemail. "I'm not feeling well. The doctor says my blood pressure is high. Aren't you going to come visit me?" I didn't respond. The next day brought 2 more calls from my father, followed by 6 text messages, all in the same familiar tone, a mix of pressure, threats, and pity. I ignored them. Finally, I blocked every number. The following week, while I was at the office, the front desk called to say a visitor was waiting. I stepped into the hallway, and before I could even see the face, the voice froze me in place. "You thought you could avoid me?" Ryan stood in the lobby of the 13th floor, his suit wrinkled, tie hanging loose, hair unkempt. His eyes carried exhaustion and rage. "I flew down from Seattle to talk to you." I stayed still. Colleagues passing by glanced curiously, a few stopping. The air shifted suddenly, as if a block of cold had rolled into a warm room. "We can talk outside," I said calmly. Ryan stepped closer, voice raised. "No need, I just need you to do your duty." My grip tightened on my bag strap, my heart pounding not from anger, but from knowing exactly what was about to come out of his mouth. "I owe the bank $200,000. My startup collapsed, mom stressed because of you, dad lost a contract. If you still consider yourself family, you have to help. He said it like an order. No, I answered instantly. Ryan frowned, stepping half a step closer. Why not? You can afford it. You make good money. Your place has a view. You paint, you take art classes, you live like a tourist while mom can't sleep because you disappeared. The family is in crisis and you won't move a finger? Do you realize where you're standing, Ryan? I asked quietly. What? This is where I work. You showed up unannounced, not caring if I was in a meeting, busy, living in own, independent life, and you demand money, as if I'm an ATM in the corner of the house. I'm your brother, Ryan snapped. I have the right to ask you. I've helped you, I said evenly. When you lost your scholarship for cheating, I got you back on financial aid. When you botched an investment deal, I found a lawyer to pull you out. When you borrowed under mom's name, I paid it off to protect the family's reputation. But in the last 3 years, did you once call and ask, how are you doing? That's irrelevant, Ryan retorted. You're better off, so you're responsible. I shook my head. I have limits. I don't live in blind obligation anymore. My voice carried clearly through the marble lobby. People had stopped walking. A few from the engineering team looked over, their curiosity plain. I didn't flinch. I didn't retreat. I didn't apologize for being here, in my own life. Ryan gave a bitter laugh, stepping back. You've changed. You're not the sister I knew. I have changed, I said. I'm no longer the gatekeeper, the shield, or the one bowing down every time you get angry. His face flushed crimson, his whole body trembling as if ready to explode. But I wasn't the Eva from family meetings who always compromised. I turned to the receptionist. Can you call security? This person isn't allowed to approach me during work hours. Ryan froze, eyes wide. You wouldn't. I said nothing. He stood there a few seconds longer, then turned and stormed off, his shoes striking the glass walls with every step. When I returned inside, my hands were shaking slightly. Megan called just as I closed the office door. You okay? Her voice came through like a lifeline. I just saw Ryan post a story at San Francisco airport, I figured. You figured right, I said, staring out the window at the sunlit buildings stacked against each other. But you know what? I'm not angry. Just tired from caring too much for too long. I get it, Megan replied. You've gone further than even you expected of yourself. I didn't answer, just breathed slowly. From outside, the bay wind slipped through the window crack, carrying salt and the faint hum of a city that never sleeps. I sat down, opened my computer, and typed the first lines of the foundation plan for the new project. My hands were steadier than ever. That afternoon, just as things seemed to settle after the confrontation with Ryan, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't heard in almost 6 years. Harold Green, a financial advisor from the first real estate project I'd worked on back in Seattle, and one of the few friends of my father I had actually respected. I answered cautiously. Hello? Eva? Harold's voice was still deep and steady, but now tinged with hesitation. I'm sorry if this is inconvenient, but there's something I think you should know. I closed my office door. What is it? Last week, I was invited to an internal audit at Everett Bank. In the collateral list, your name appeared. I froze. He continued. I checked out of habit. The documents show you as co-owner of a property north of Lake Sammamish, listed as guarantor for a loan of $350,000. I collapsed into my chair. I didn't buy anything there. That's the problem. He paused, voice dropping. The signature looks like yours, but when I compared it with old files you submitted during the Greystone project, the strokes were different. I believe it's forged. I held the phone tight, trying to steady my racing heartbeat. Whose names are on the deed with mine? Richard and Helen Collins. And the authorized user of the land is Ryan Collins. I couldn't speak, not a word. Just the wind on the line and the clock ticking in my office, pounding at my temples. Harold went on carefully. I can't share more than this, but Eva, if you want, I can connect you with investigators specializing in asset forgery. This isn't simple. I thanked him, my voice dry. The call ended, leaving the screen black and the ground beneath me tilted. I sat frozen for hours, not opening the computer or touching the phone. My hands shook as I pulled a leather journal from the drawer, flipping through my personal financial notes. I began reviewing every page, every number. A savings account from my hometown bank had vanished 3 years ago without explanation. A strange mortgage from when I first moved to Seattle. That year I was buried in the suspension bridge project, barely checking my credit reports. I had always believed that if I lived responsibly, no one would have reason to touch what was mine. But it turned out that trust was the weakest place of all. That night, I called Megan, my voice eerily calm. I need a lawyer who specializes in asset forgery. Do you know anyone? She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What happened?" "I don't want to explain over the phone. Are you free tomorrow?" We met at a small cafe in the Marina District where bay winds rattled the striped curtains. I handed Megan the documents Harold had emailed: loan applications, land contracts, the forged signature printed clearly. She turned each page, her hand trembling. "My God, I thought I was just being treated unfairly," I said, staring into the bottom of my empty teacup. "But they've been using my name as a financial shield." Megan gripped my hand under the table. "Do you want to press charges?" "I don't know yet, but I won't stay silent." That night, I dug through old boxes for files from 5 years ago. Tax returns I once filed jointly with my parents. Signature samples from when I opened my first investment account. Piece by piece, I laid them out like a puzzle. The next morning, I met with attorney Hannah Porter, recommended by Megan. A woman in her 50s with prematurely silver hair, sharp eyes, and a surprisingly gentle voice. After hearing me out, she nodded. "Your case has enough grounds for criminal charges if you pursue it, but it won't just bring lawsuits. It could tear every relationship apart." I nodded back. "I'm not looking to send them to jail. I just want my autonomy and the truth." Hannah folded the folder slowly. "Then we'll start with a full credit inquiry verifying every asset in your name." I left, not lighter, but clearer. On the way back to the office, I saw Daniel standing near the art studio, holding 2 coffees. He waved when he spotted me. "Passing by your office. Guessed it was lunch," he said, handing me 1 cup. "Today's charcoal drawing, or do you want real charcoal to burn off some anger?" I laughed, short and hoarse. "I just found out I've been turned into my family's asset." Daniel studied me quietly. He didn't pry, he only said, "Then it's time you decide what's worth keeping." I sipped the coffee, hot and bitter but not nearly as hard to swallow as what I had endured for 36 years. Inside, something was starting to stand tall, not loud, not angry, just clear. And that clarity told me I was on the right path. The invitation to Ryan's engagement party arrived by email, the subject line in all caps: "Beginning a new journey together. Family is forever." A short note from Mom was attached. "I hope you'll come. It's time to forgive, Eva." I stared at the screen for a long time, not from emotion, but from the emptiness spreading through me, like every word and action from them had dissolved, leaving nothing lasting behind. This time, I didn't decline right away. I forwarded the invitation to Hannah, along with the files on forged loans, land contracts, and most importantly, the company shares I had inherited from my grandfather, the man who founded the small engineering firm that launched my father's career. I need you to check if anyone's trying to transfer these shares without my consent." 3 days later, Hannah called back. Her voice was grave. "We have a very big problem." I went to her office that same afternoon. On the desk lay a copy of the contract transferring family company shares to a venture capital fund, headed by none other than Ryan's fiancée, Jessica Lancaster. "She's the director of this fund?" I asked. "Number. But she's the authorized representative according to the papers signed by your father," Hannah said, sliding the folder toward me. "They use the excuse of consolidating family assets to push the shares out of your hands without needing your formal consent." I leaned back in my chair, my mind spinning. That inheritance was the only thing my grandfather had left me, 5% of the original company shares, with a clause that they could not be transferred without my direct signature or that of a legal guardian. But my father had circumvented it by invoking so-called family representation rights in a meeting where I hadn't even been present. "Do you want to go public?" Hannah asked. "We have enough evidence to file a formal complaint immediately." I nodded. "I'll bring these to the engagement party." The event was held at the Rosewood Hotel in Seattle, one of the most expensive venues in the city. The grand hall was decorated with white flowers and glass candles, tables draped in pale gray satin cloth, hand-lettered place cards on every chair. As I stepped inside, more than a few heads turned in surprise. My mother stood near the bar, chatting with old friends, but froze when she saw me. "Eva," she murmured, walking over with visible hesitation. "I didn't think you'd come." "I'm here for another reason," I replied evenly. "Not for reconciliation." My father was close by, standing with Ryan and Jessica. They turned as well. Jessica wore a glittering white gown, her blonde hair pinned high, her face glowing with the confidence of someone who thought everything was already secured. Ryan held her shoulder, his eyes cautious as they met mine. "Eva," he said, "thank you for coming. It means a lot to the family." I stepped toward the microphone set in the center of the small stage where, an hour later, they were supposed to give their vows. "Before you start your new life together," I said, "I think everyone here deserves to know the truth about how that future has been arranged." The room stilled. Laughter, whispers, the clinking of glasses all fell silent. I raised the folder high. Over the past 3 months, I discovered multiple assets in my name had been misused. Real estate, loan guarantees, and most recently the company shares my grandfather left me. I opened the documents, reading the first lines of the transfer contract aloud. "This signature is not mine, and the venture fund under Jessica Lancaster's name is listed as the recipient of my family shares for the purpose of financial rescue for Ryan Collins." Whispers broke out across the room. Instead of apologizing or admitting the truth, they disguised it by hosting this party, making everyone believe in unity. But behind the glamour is appropriation and an illegal act. Jessica took a step back, her face pale, hands clutching the edge of her gown. Ryan moved forward. "That's enough, Eva." I met his eyes. "How much money have you taken from the company without ever consulting me? You used my inheritance to cover your debts, and how long did you think you could keep me in the dark?" My mother stepped in, eyes glistening. "You're humiliating the family in front of everyone. Is this really necessary?" I turned to her. "Yes, because if I stay silent, my silence will be turned into consent, and that has never been true." I placed the entire stack of documents on the central table, next to the 3-tiered engagement cake frosted in white. "If anyone wants to review these closely, I'll be in room 214 upstairs. But if you believe family bonds justify exploitation, I'm sorry I don't share that belief." I walked out of the hall, past stunned faces, down the red-carpeted corridor, neither hurried nor bowing my head. Behind me, voices swelled like the hum of a shell cracking open just enough for light to pour through. And someone once taught that silence was a virtue, had finally stepped away from that role, with every step firmly my own. I stood in the middle of the rosewood hall, light from the chandeliers reflecting off ivory walls, bouncing across invitations and floral arrangements, brightening the room but also exposing the shadows of years past. My hand rested on the pile of bank statements, property deeds, and photos I had prepared. Ryan's birthdays with three-tier cakes, diamond rings from my parents, extravagant trips contrasted with my birthdays, grocery store cakes, self-wrapped gifts, blurry photos barely kept. I lifted the folder again, my voice steady but strong. This is the truth. Everything has been documented. I'm not here to shame anyone, but to show how favoritism has existed for years. The hall was silent. I could hear the clink of glasses, the collective sighs from guests. A few blinked, struggling to reconcile their memories with the evidence before them. Suddenly, Ryan charged forward, his face crimson, fists clenched, voice shaking. "Stop! You're making this up!" I didn't back down. "Ryan, how long will you keep denying it? The numbers, the contracts, the gifts I paid for, they're all here. You've lived under my protection, and now you want to continue?" His teeth ground together, and then, unable to contain himself, he slapped me across the face. The sound echoed through the hall, rattling glasses on the tables. The crowd gasped. Some stepped back, eyes wide, others exchanged stunned looks, unable to believe what they had just seen. I staggered half a step, still clutching the documents. My cheek burned, but anger and resolve outweighed the pain. I stood firm, unafraid. The first voice to break the silence was Aunt Laura, my mother's younger sister. She rose, her voice trembling but clear. "Enough! Ryan, have you forgotten all these years? I've seen Eva care for, support, and sacrifice for this family, and only now do I see the truth." Murmurs spread quickly. More relatives began siding with me. An uncle who had stayed silent for years stepped forward sternly. "Parents, you've gone too far. Time and assets have been blatantly unfair, and Eva has endured more than we ever realized." My mother stepped back, her eyes clouded with tears, her hands trembling, lips moving without sound. My father cut in sharply. "You don't understand the circumstances. Everything was for the family." Another cousin raised his hand, voice firm. "A family built on lies and favoritism isn't a family. We've all watched too long without speaking." The hall erupted anger, disbelief, voices clashing. I stood in the middle, breathing evenly, feeling light yet powerful. Decades of silence and unrecognized sacrifice were now laid bare. Ryan looked around, searching for support, but most eyes were on me. Jessica retreated, lips pressed tight, her hand clutching her chest as she realized control had slipped away. I set the documents down on the central table. Standing tall, I'm not here to accuse or apologize. I'm here to speak the truth. And to anyone who thought exploiting me would be accepted, look at this. Several guests stepped closer, examining the papers. Some fiddled with invitations, others whispered over the evidence I had laid out. My father raised a hand to stop me from saying more, but the relatives around him were no longer silent. Aunt Laura leaned toward my mother, exclaiming, "We can't ignore this anymore. Eva has sacrificed too much without recognition. You and Ryan must be accountable for fairness in this family." My mother's lips trembled, real tears now streaming down her cheeks, not staged, not pressured. She looked at me, her voice unsteady. You shouldn't have had to endure this for so many years." I faced my father, my voice calm but cutting. "Exactly, I've been silent long enough. Now I stand here, with what's rightfully mine, and no one has the right to touch it." The hall was still for a few beats. Then murmurs rose again as guests processed the weight of the evidence. Some family friends shook their heads, whispering, "How long has this gone on without anyone knowing?" Ryan stood frozen, his hand trembling. He looked at me, his eyes a mix of fury and fear. Eva, you... I'm not your little sister anymore, I said. I am Eva Collins, a woman standing on her own feet. My words echoed across the hall, stirring buried memories. Some relatives came forward, laying hands on my shoulders, whispering, "She carried more than we ever thought." We were wrong to let this go on. For the first time, my father slumped, his proud stance gone. My mother rushed after him, but I didn't look back. I kept my distance, unwavering. The guests, curious and indignant, began to understand. This hall was no longer Ryan and Jessica's engagement party, but a silent indictment written in documents, photographs, and my resolve. Ryan's shoulders sagged, his body trembling. Jessica leaned aside, realizing that everything she thought she owned was illegitimate. I stood firm, my hand still on the evidence. There was no shouting, no more violence, just eyes sharp as steel and silence heavy enough for everyone to recognize. Strength doesn't always come from force or authority. Sometimes it comes from standing up to speak the truth before a crowd, no matter the resistance. A few relatives openly sided with me, whispering about the years they'd watched me carry burdens while Ryan was celebrated. They shook their heads, faces full of regret and anger. I heard Aunt Laura murmur, "She deserves all of this. Finally, everything is seen." I drew in a deep breath. A strange sensation, swelling in my chest, light yet full of energy. Years of endurance and patience now had meaning. I didn't need apologies, I didn't need forgiveness, I just needed to stand here and let the truth speak. The hall fell quiet again, as if everyone was rethinking how they had viewed family, privilege, and fairness. Ryan looked up, his eyes flickering with chaos and fear, but I no longer needed to look at him. I knew this moment was more than reclaiming my place in the family. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one I would write myself, free of favoritism and financial exploitation I had once endured. I stepped out of the Rosewood Hall, where the murmurs still echoed but no longer touched my stride. No more trembling, no more tears. I felt each beat of my heart, steady and clear, like a bridge linking past and present. I lifted my head, shoulders square, walking down the long marble corridor as the pale golden light from the chandeliers reflected off my hair, casting a faint halo. Daniel was waiting outside, his eyes calm yet full of quiet reassurance. When he saw me approach, he held out his hand. I took it, warmth spreading up my arm, a reminder that I was no longer alone. Megan stood by the car, her smile radiant, though her eyes brimmed with worry. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice trembling. I smiled. "I'm fine. I've never felt steadier." We walked silently into Megan's SUV. On the drive back to my small apartment by the San Francisco Bay, I stared out the window. The water shimmered under the setting sun, reflecting onto buildings and piers, glittering like a reminder of new beginnings. For the first time in years, the space around to me felt open, free of the boundaries my family had tried to draw. When we arrived, I paused in front of a well-maintained old building, its faded light blue paint and polished brown wooden door glowing under the streetlight. Megan opened the door, leading me up to a second-floor apartment, a space barely 650 square feet, with a large window overlooking the bay. Sunlight streamed in, gilding the worn wooden floor with a warmth that felt like freedom itself. I set down my suitcase, opened the window, and let the sea breeze and scent of salt fill the room. Walking slowly through the apartment, I traced the bare walls, the untouched corners, the scratches on the floor. This space was mine, untouched by anyone else's control. I pressed my hand to the wall and felt truth, freedom, and agency. Megan stood beside me, watching. "What's the first thing you'll do?" she asked. I turned, my voice calm but resolute. "I'll decorate this apartment with what I love, my paintings, the sketches I once tucked away in drawers, Everything here will be mine, not ornaments for someone else's approval. We began unpacking. I placed my old paintings around the room, sketches I had once done for projects in Seattle, notebooks filled with ideas. The space warmed immediately, not like my family's house, but in a way that carried only my imprint, not their expectations. The next morning, I called Hannah, my lawyer, to officially begin securing my shares and personal assets. We combed through every document, filing reports with the proper agencies, ensuring everything was legal and transparent. Each step felt like a cord tying together a wounded past with the present I was building. Daniel often stopped by with coffee, sometimes standing beside me as I painted. He wasn't just a support but a mirror, reminding me that everything could be rebuilt with patience and courage. Every brushstroke you make today is an answer to what they once took from you, he said one afternoon, as I blended red and blue on the palette. I smiled, my hand moving steadily. I realized this wasn't just painting, it was rebuilding myself from abandoned fragments. The colors bled across the canvas, forming imperfect shapes, but they were mine, untouched and unclaimed by anyone else. Evenings I spent cleaning, arranging, claiming the space inch by inch. I placed my desk by the window, letting the light fall across my designs, reminding me I could still work with focus and inspiration. I hung my paintings on the walls without a thought to my parents' or Ryan's judgment. Each canvas, each design, testified that my creativity and worth were still intact. A week later, Megan and I sat on the balcony, watching cars cross the bridge by the docks. She said softly, "See? You've found your own space again." I turned to her, smiling gently. Not just space, a way of living. No more burden of proving myself. No more tolerating favoritism or pressure. In the days that followed, I reorganized every legal document, opened a separate bank account, set up my own savings fund, and cut off all financial ties to my family. I handled every payment, every contract myself. I contacted banks, insurers, and investment firms to ensure no one could ever misuse my name or rights again. Daniel often came by in the afternoons, carrying new designs, discussing light, form, and proportion with me. He never judged or imposed, only guided and walked alongside. I began to see that true support didn't diminish my worth. It made me stronger. One morning, I sat in the center of my apartment, looking out at the bay, writing down my feelings. The smell of salt, the sound of waves, the sunlight streaming through the window painted a living canvas outside. I smiled quietly. The apartment wasn't big, but it was mine where I could breathe, work, create, and live the life I wanted. That evening, I hung the largest painting I'd finished in weeks past. River winding through mountains, the crimson sunset reflecting across the water. I stood before it, hand on the frame, strength flooding me. Not for display, but as a reminder. Eva Collins had survived, stood up, and was rebuilding from her own foundation. Megan stood beside me, sipping coffee, smiling. "You're okay now, aren't you?" I nodded, my voice soft but firm. "I've never belonged anywhere more than here." The room was quiet, except for the wind slipping through the window and the gentle sound of waves. I breathed deeply, as if the forgotten years, the pain, the family's pressure all dissolved in that moment. The apartment, the paintings, myself, Daniel, and Megan together, they formed the pillars of my renewal, of a life I finally owned with pride. A year passed since that stormy engagement party. I stood in the San Francisco office boardroom, looking at the model of the new overpass project I had designed. The structure was featured in Structural Engineering Today, with an article highlighting its creativity and sustainability. As I gazed at the drawings and material tests, a warm pride filled me. Every effort, every hard choice of the past year had been repaid with results I could see and touch. Megan dropped by, setting a cup of coffee on the table. I heard the magazine staff were blown away. You deserve it. I smiled, watching my colleagues discuss the final details. We worked hard, but what matters most is that I stand here in my own right, not because of family, not under their control. Life outside of work had changed too. Ryan went bankrupt after reckless investments, buried in debt, his reputation collapsing. My family, no longer propped up by his money, fell into hardship. I heard through occasional texts and calls, but I no longer felt responsible for fixing or carrying them. They had to face consequences, just as I once had. Meanwhile, I built a chosen family. Megan remained my rock. Daniel often came by, whether for work discussions, painting sessions, coffee, or evenings reading side by side. A few colleagues became close friends. We shared meals, challenges, encouragement, and laughter without obligation, only genuine care. No pressure, no need to prove myself, just peace and mutual respect. Late at night, I often sat in my apartment looking out at the bay. City lights reflected on the water, skyscrapers casting shadows across the calm surface. I pulled out the small wooden box I had kept hidden, opened the lid, and laid the $5 coupon my parents had once given me on that bitter Christmas night onto the table. No pain remained, only a memory, a reminder that my worth was no longer defined by anyone else. Each time I looked at that box, I told myself that every achievement, every choice, every path was mine. I began rearranging my space with paintings I'd created, old designs, and books I loved, so that each time I stepped inside, I felt seen, valued, and whole. One afternoon, when Daniel stopped by to discuss a new project, he stood by the window, looking at me with understanding in his eyes. "You've been through far more than I ever imagined. No one has the right to take away what belongs to you." I gave a faint smile, but inside, years of layered emotions melted, leaving room for freedom and strength. We sat drinking coffee, talking about work and art, but this time there was no pressure, no expectations, except the ones I chose for myself. Life gradually found balance. I often woke early, jogged along the bay, listened to the waves against the pier, sipped hot coffee, then opened my laptop to review projects. Afternoons were for painting, evenings for books and conversations with Megan or Daniel. I felt the rhythm of a life I had chosen, untouched by others' control. One evening, I sat at my desk and opened the small box again. The $5 coupon lay between small paintings and old design drafts, a symbol of growth and self-determination. I gazed at it, smiling, realizing how far I had come from resignation to freedom. On Saturday, Megan and I attended the community art class. I reached out and touched the freshly finished canvas, brushstrokes imperfect yet bold. Daniel stood nearby, reminding me, "Every painting is proof, not just for others, but for yourself." I nodded, a sense of wholeness spreading through me. No more family pressure, no more duty to sacrifice for someone else. Only Eva, the woman who had learned to protect herself, to love and value who she was without anyone's validation. The engineering projects moved forward. I signed a contract with a major design firm downtown, becoming a project director, fully recognized by my team. These achievements didn't bring shallow joy, but deep confidence that I was on the right path and every effort mattered. On a weekend evening, I sat on my balcony with a hot cup of tea, watching the bridge's lights reflect across the bay. Megan and Daniel stood beside me. We were silent, wrapped in peace. No words were needed. We all felt what mattered: choice, freedom, and self-worth that no one could take away. I placed the small box back on the shelf, the $5 coupon resting among my personal things. It was no longer a symbol of hurt, but of resilience and self-determination. Each passing day, I drew strength from choices made for myself. From building a chosen family where people came together out of genuine care, not obligation or false duty. For me, every day now was a chance to recreate life on my own terms. I still heard news of my family, of Ryan's bankruptcy and their struggles, but my heart carried no weight. I knew my path was right, and my worth was no longer dictated by anyone else. Every painting I hung, every design I completed was proof of the rebirth of Eva Collins, the woman who had broken free from favoritism and control, stepping into a life built entirely on her own choices and effort. I sat, quietly, looking out at the bay, breathing deeply, feeling every pulse, every moment of freedom, knowing I finally belonged to myself. Looking back, I understood that not everyone is born into a family that truly cherishes and loves them. But that doesn't mean we can't create another family of our own, a circle of respect, honesty, and care. I kept that $5 coupon, not to cling to pain, but to remind myself that my worth would never again be defined by someone else's joke. And what about you? If you found yourself overlooked or treated unfairly in your own family, would you stay silent or stand up to protect your worth? I truly want to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below. And if you'd like to keep walking this journey with me, to hear more stories about family and about how people reclaim their voice in life, remember to follow this channel. Because these stories aren't just mine, they may, in some way, be yours too.